You guys asked for more details, and I'm back with details. So I'm nothing if not a servant of the people. So today I'm going to go into a little bit more depth about the greedflation video that we talked about just a few weeks ago on my TikTok channel. If you did not see that, that means that you're on YouTube because it didn't get posted on YouTube. We're going to go back in time. The year's 2020 when toilet paper was currency, hand sanitizer was liquid gold, and everyone and their mother learned what a sourdough starter was. The world shut down, we were all stuck inside. Somehow or another, Tiger King was leading the charge and keeping us all sane. What a beautiful time it was.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
The first part of this video, we talked about the fact that everyone loves to blame politicians and other people that aren't actually responsible for the greedflation that we experience today, and how that is not actually true. So what is the truth? What's actually happening? Well, greedflation is exactly what's happening, but let's look at the statistics on what is going on surrounding this time frame, especially 2020 when COVID was happening.
Oh boy, zombie apocalypse!
Part 1, we talked about Conagra brands. This is one of the biggest offenders that I was able to find, or the most recognizable anyway. I'm sure they all do this. This is just one that we can look at. So Conagra brands. What do they own? What do you know? What do you use? Chef Boyardee, Banquet, Bird's Eye, all the frozen vegetables that you get, and also the frozen meals that we talked about in the first one. So when I keep referencing the first one, what did we talk about in the first one? Well, we talked about the fact that people stopped eating frozen dinners. So Conagra's profits went through the toilet. They stopped selling them, but they did start selling vegetables because everyone started eating frozen vegetables. But they didn't have the production chain in place to help handle the influx of people wanting to eat frozen vegetables. So their profits went down, and then woohoo, out of nowhere they spike. Why did they spike? Well, they like to say that the profits of their company or the cost of their goods increased because of 10 tariffs. Trying to relay this back to Donald Trump's tariffs on goods and services coming from out of country like China or wherever else they might be coming from. But the truth is if you look at the statistics, it has nothing to do with tariffs. We know that because of this chart. What actually happened is they used it as a turning point toward saying something that they could use to help explain away the increase of the cost of their goods, when in reality what it actually was them just making a whole bunch of money off their backs. Quick reference back to this graph here, you can take a look at all the stats that we talked about in the first video, but here are a little bit more breakdown on some of the other things. So Conagra brands, what do we know? Well, back in 2019, their net income was $840 million. And then from 2021, when everyone was panic buying and buying all the goods and services that they sell during COVID, their profits increased to 1.3 billion. That makes sense. Everyone's buying stuff out of panic, their profits go up. Total sense. 2022 to 2024, though, things tank, go through the toilet. Why did they say? Well, truth is they just didn't have the stuff in place to help handle all of the new influx of people wanting to buy their vegetables. And we see that in the totals that go from 1.3 billion down to 428 million in 2024. So obviously they didn't have it in place. Now what happens in 2025? Trump says, I'm going to put out tariffs on everybody. So Conagra says, hey, Mr. Trump, thank you for the excuse. Now we can raise our prices again. We have something to blame on. It's not us. It's not our greed. We just somehow mystically went from $428 million last year to 1.15 billion this year.
You cannot blame that on me.
No one understands. It's all 10 tariffs. It's all tariffs on metal. But in fact, it's not, because we can see here that the average tariff on said metals is only 50%, which means it grew by half. If it was $2, now it's $3. But your growth Conagra is, let me check my stats here, 231% from the previous year. Tell me again how tariffs caused that? Not tariffs. It's greed. Let's look at another thing, one that we can all relate to, that we've all seen the change happen recently. Actually, my wife and I were just talking about this yesterday because she went to good old Dollar Tree. It's no longer $1. In fact, it was $1.50 and then it was $2, and they're talking about raising it even more from $2 to $2.50 in some cases, maybe even $3. Who knows where the cap's at? So is it because everything costs more money? Not really. You see, Dollar Tree has, in their first hike ever in 2021, increased from $1 to $1.25. Makes sense? COVID, supply chain issues, right? That's what everybody told us. But now we're in 2025 and they have recorded a 42% profit jump in a single quarter. Now, maybe that's just because they're selling more stuff. No, they're not. Check the graph. Same amount of stuff. 42% profit increase in a single quarter, not including the full year. Now, these two things, we've already discussed these two things, so let's not beat a dead horse. Let's talk about a couple of different things that we use on a daily basis, things that are actually important to me and you. Let's look at groceries. Gotta love them. They tell us that the inflation is only 26 roughly percent, and we're all screaming in the back of our heads, no, that's not true. I know what prices used to be. We know that they weren't nearly as high as they are. You're not wrong. You're not oblivious to the world. They're just trying to Jedi mind trick you into these are not the groceries you were looking for. These are not the prices you think they are.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
That's exactly what it is. The truth is, everything is increased. So let's take a look at some of the increases, shall we? So the most basic of essentials, one that we basically all use every single day from toast to sandwiches, bread. How has bread increased over time? Well, we actually have statistics from a government website codenamed Fred, F-R-E-D. Here's the graphs, bam, bam. You can see them all. So we can look back at different historical changes that have happened over the last couple of decades, back to the 1980s essentially is when this graph starts. Looking at 1981, the cost of bread, plain white bread, was basically 54 cents per loaf. That's what we're basing it off of and where we start at. We can see that that graph generally goes up over time, obviously, because things get more expensive and inflation has a regular chain that we follow across, time and humanity, it seems, in the United States. But then we get to what is essentially 2008, when the housing market crisis happened. Everything went up. We all know it went up. Those of us that lived through 2008, we know things got expensive, things got pricey, people didn't know what they were going to do, a lot of bankruptcies happened. But the spike that happened in 2008, as you can see by the graph, isn't nearly as bad as 2020. Now, that makes a little bit more sense if you think about it. In 2008, the housing market crash, it did affect a lot of people, but it really kind of took the most effect on big money people. It took effect on the housing market, sure, it made it expensive to live. It also took effect on some of the economy overall, which caused people to lose their jobs or caused, basically money to flow less fluently. But if you look at 2020 with coronavirus, it shut everything down. I mean, you went for the difference there is things get tight, things aren't open. Completely different story. So it makes sense that it spikes a little bit in 2020, as you can see by the graph. What doesn't make sense is if we look at kind of middle 2020 going toward the end, in March of 2020, bread costs $1.37, $1.38 a loaf, according to the statistics they have analyzed. We know that COVID really started to take effect price-wise toward the end of 2020 into 2021. And you can see even after where I took this screenshot at, that it kind of bumps up a little bit toward the end. So maybe call it $1.50. It's not drastic. But after 2020, we start to get into the later years after that. Now, they blame supply chain issues. Maybe that's part of it, but it doesn't quite explain how in 2024, after most of these supply chain issues are resolved, mind you, it's been 3.5 years since these things started, it's the most expensive it's ever been at over $2 a loaf. So how do we explain that? Well, some economists and some people like to say, oh, the supply chain issues or the cost of diesel or the cost of shipping and freight and everything else. Well, let's take a look at that. 2022, diesel reached its highest point of $5.78. 2022, 3 years ago, it's at its highest. So it's been corrected since then, but our costs haven't gone down. So it's not entirely the supply chain isn't entirely made up of just diesel trucks. We know that there's trains and boats and everything else, but this is one of the main fueling factors, especially in the economy of America, is trucks driving across the country with goods that are then handed off to different, supply warehouses or, grocery stores, whatever have you. So the total cost of gas has went down actually pretty exponentially to the point that it was basically in 2014. So that's resolved, but our prices are still high. And if you look back at 2020 to 2021 is actually when diesel was the cheapest. So there's a little bit of supply chain as far as getting things from country to country because, people didn't want to pass COVID and spread it a whole lot. But after that, after everything opens back up, it's not a real good determining factor. I'm sure there's other supply chain issues that happen, supply chain, problems that aren't completely represented by diesel. But the fact is diesel's cheaper now than it was in 2020, and actually in 2022 it's about the same price. So it's cheaper now than it has been, but prices haven't gone down, and our supply chains are, by most economists' theorization, have been corrected, and we're not really at a point that we're missing anything or it's hard to get anything. Most everything's available again, so the prices still being up don't make a lot of sense until you look at the background. So let's look at something that we all handle basically at least once a week, I would imagine. Most people go to McDonald's. So the graph on screen right now is a graph that I actually put together using ChatGPT and a bunch of research that I was able to do. I just basically had ChatGPT graph this thing because I don't know how to make graphs super quick. But this basically graphs out the cost of items at McDonald's from the cheapest to the most expensive. This graphs everything from a McChicken to a double quarter pounder or quarter pounder with cheese, I think is what I have on here because it was what was available. And you can see the prices from 2014, which is the oldest data that I was able to find, probably because this is about when they started keeping track of this stuff. You can see the graph specifically in the most purchased items. I think that's the key point. The most purchased items spike through the roof. The only caveat there being maybe like a drink, because most people buy drinks. But what is that? McChicken, the Filet-O-Fish, the McDouble, the 10-piece McNugget meal, those things spike uncontrollably, especially post 2024. What's the explanation for that? We see it rise gradually over the course of essentially 10 years from 14 to 24, but then in 25, all of a sudden we get this outlier where things go up. I dug and dug and dug, and McDonald's they don't even want to basically tell you that it's happening. They just expect you to just pay the price and forget that it's going on. So we actually have an available waste sheet for McDonald's. So I worked at McDonald's back in 2014 is whenever I left. It's the year I graduated high school. And there's a waste chart available from 2020. See, the waste chart back when I worked there, and it looks like it's still being used today, is a chart that's used to keep track of material costs or food costs that basically get wasted. So whenever people are back there making food, they make a McDouble, they drop that McDouble on the floor, they obviously can't serve that anymore, so they throw it in a waste bin. At the end of the night or midway through the day, whenever it needs to be checked, the managers will go around, collect these waste bins, count out the total of whatever's in there, and then do the math to sort out how much money was actually wasted that day. And this chart basically shows you the cost of that particular item. So if we look through here, let's just look at the regular ones. Let's look at what we know in here. A Big Mac, for instance. A Big Mac costs 87 cents. The cost of a Big Mac in today's terms is just shy of $9 for a Big Mac meal. So they're making a 900% profit off of a Big Mac. And we know that fries don't cost that much. I remember back, it's not actually on this graph or this chart that we're able to see because this is only one page of it, but I remember back in 2014, whenever I was working there, a medium fry was like 30 cents. And the same with a drink, it's even less, because drinks cost basically absolutely nothing for them to make. So we're talking about a total investment. Let's give them on the high side and say $1.75 in 2020. And we do the average inflation calculator we calculate the average inflation based off of what they tell us inflation has been over the last 5 years. And what do we come to? Well, the inflation rate that they tell us we should be expecting, which is around 26%, 26.5%, depending on the category. That means that from 2020 to today, they would have raised, or their cost invested in a meal is going to be $2.18, assuming it matches the same. It probably doesn't, because McDonald's owns most of their supply chain, and really their costs don't fluctuate nearly as much as our personal costs do. But let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. They're at $2.18. That Big Mac meal costs just shy of $10, basically. And that basically is just a little bit shy of 500% profit margin in a Big Mac meal. Now, I know that wages come out of that, but if you take account like a Big Mac meal, right? The average employee at McDonald's, at least in the area that I work in, makes $15 an hour. So if they sell 2 Big Mac meals, those 2 Big Mac meals pay for that wage for an hour. And I know when I worked there, we would sell a Big Mac probably every 5 minutes at minimum, if not more. So these Big Macs, 2 Big Macs a piece, pay for a whole employee. And I don't know about you guys, but I've noticed that McDonald's, Taco Bell, Burger King, all these places, they're understaffed now because nobody wants to work there for one. But even when they are working there, they try to spread their employees out as thin as they possibly can. So if you've got 5, 6 employees working at a McDonald's and it only costs 2 Big Macs to pay their wage for an hour, they're basically paying all their employees based off my experience with Big Macs. Like the whole day. Everything else is just their profit margins. So what does that lead to as far as actual profits are concerned? Well, we have this graph here. I'll put it on the screen. There you can see it. McDonald's profit over the last couple of years. In 2021, their profit as of then was $7.54 billion. That's net profit after paying expenses and paying out everything that needed to be paid out. In 2023, the most recent graph that I'm able to find, they had a net profit of $8.47 billion. And as of 2025, they're up to $8.76 billion, which is roughly a $300 million increase from the previous year. Now, we know that from 24 to 25, those prices jumped exponentially. Is it possible that the price jump is solely and directly related to the cost of buying food at McDonald's? 100%. Because you and I both know that wages haven't changed since 2024. In fact, I have a graph for that. Most up-to-date graph shows up to 2023 from the Social Security Administration of basically the country, shows 2023. And we can see from about 2019 to 2023, because that's really our focus period, they average at around 5% annually. So over the course of each year, 5% growth in income for the average person. Now, what does that mean for a McDonald's employee? Basically nothing. I know that the $15 an hour signs have been in front of McDonald's for the last, well, since 2022, whenever they spiked them initially. So they're getting paid the same wage as they always have since basically the beginning of COVID. They haven't increased wages. They haven't really went up in costs, but their profit, or their prices have went through the roof comparably. And so have their profits. That's McDonald's. One more thing that I found while digging into this that actually made me laugh, like it made me laugh so hard that I actually went downstairs. My grandmother-in-law babysits my son, and I had to go downstairs and tell her this because it was so funny. I couldn't help but go tell somebody. So back in 2019, I'll put it on screen for you. In 2019, using the Wayback Machine on Walmart's website, I was able to go back and look at the price of toilet paper before COVID hit. Because during COVID, toilet paper went through the roof because everybody was scared for toilet paper. We all remember the frenzy.
You heard me right, toilet paper.
But in 2019, the cost of a 18 mega roll pack of Angel Soft was $14.97. And in 2025, basically today, this exact same pack, the 18 mega rolls, it's actually cheaper than it was. And when I saw this, I was like, oh, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this one particular thing is going to prove me wrong. Out of all the things, it's going to be toilet paper, because after living through COVID, who knows what could happen with toilet paper. But I was looking at it and I was like, man, you know, my spidey sense was tingling, my bullshit detector was going off, and I was like, there's no way that toilet paper is actually cheaper. It's $12.48 today versus the $14.97 that it was back in 2019. And then I found this part. So if we look at the descriptions for toilet paper back in 2020 or 2019, which same description, just different time, the mega roll at that point in time was 425 sheets of 2-ply paper. Mega roll. Today, the mega roll is only 320 sheets of 2-ply paper. That's 105 sheets less toilet paper than 2020. Right. So if we divide the 320 sheets that we get currently today by the 450 sheets that we got back in the day pre-COVID, then we come up with basically 29%. There's 29% less paper on the same mega roll than we had back then, which we'll even that out and call it 30% less. So it's not even, it's a little bit more than a fifth even. It's closer to a third of the toilet paper that we once got. Now, if we take that 30% and apply the 30% increase to the $12.48 that we get today, we are actually paying $16.22 for the same toilet paper. They have reduced the total amount you get, but increased the price to make it look cheaper. But in fact, you're just running out faster, so you're buying the same thing. This is the same age-old tactic of credit card companies sending you, 10 credit card companies sending you a credit card offer when you turn 18, because they know that once you get attached to a brand, you stick with that brand. It's more likely you continue using that brand. Toilet paper is one of those things. I bet you if you think about it in your personal life, you have been using the same toilet paper for 15 years.
Oh.
They know that this is a resellable product that you go back to, just like you would with your credit card company. Or I would venture to bet that most people have one particular item that they buy every day. Maybe it's like dish soap, you always go with Dove, you always go with Dawn, or shampoo, you go with Dove. It's the same kind of thing. You buy the same thing over and over again, so they know that you're going to see this price change. So rather than changing the price, they lower the quantity and make it cheaper and say, voila, it's cheaper for you. But in fact, you're paying exponentially more than you would have been back there for the same amount of product. It's shrinkflation is what it is. But profit margins, again, through the roof. I don't think we have to talk about that at this point. Something that we should all feel in our own wallets, something that we all know is happening. And in fact, it was a debate topic during the last election cycle. Eggs.
Say hello to Oyster Bunny.
So the last thing we need to talk about, the one that honestly, when I looked into this, kind of like grossed me out, weirded me out, kind of maybe even scared me a little bit. I'm not exactly sure what the best way to look at this is, but my brain runs down rabbit holes. So eggs. We all know eggs are expensive. They've went up exponentially over the last few years. In fact, it was so drastic that in the last election cycle, it became a pretty hotbed topic for a lot of people. How are you going to fix egg prices? So if we look at egg prices, most of the time we've been told that the egg prices are as high as they are because of bird flu. Essentially, the bird flu killed off all the chickens. They stopped laying as much eggs. Well, the same exact thing happened back in 2008. It wasn't as dramatic. Supposedly this bird flu is way worse than it was back in 2008 or 2009, so whatever time frame that the last big bird flu happened. And it didn't spike nearly as much. In fact, it looks like, based on this graph, somewhere around 2012, there was another bird flu epidemic that also spiked the prices. Again, not nearly as dramatic as post-2020 into 2025. Right now, believe it or not, egg prices are down, according to Fred again, so you can see that graph, but it didn't spike during the other bird flus. But it also raised another question. If egg prices are up because of bird flu, both in 2022, when the first wave of the bird flu hit, and 2025, now that the bird flu is kind of weaning off and things are starting to fall again, you would assume that chicken prices would be up, because if the birds are dying from the flu before they lay eggs, there's less chickens, so there's less chicken. But that's not the case. In 2022, the average cost of basically per pound of chicken was $4.75 during the first wave of the bird flu. That makes sense, the chickens are dying. But in 2025, when the bird flu hit again, it didn't spike. The chicken prices didn't go through the roof. Why is that? And I've searched everywhere. I can't find an answer. But it does make you wonder, were they selling us the influenza birds to eat? I don't know. Enough birds were dying that it raised egg prices exponentially. But chicken prices didn't. I don't know. Just a thought. Food for thought, I suppose. You guys can think about that on your way home. So, Conagra, Dollar Tree, McDonald's, chicken, eggs, diesel, gas, all of it. All of it. It doesn't follow a cost line anymore. It follows a profit line. Basically, everywhere you look, these are just examples that I came up with off the top of my head as I dug into it. All of these things follow profit lines. None of them follow cost trends. So if you want to break down how to fight back against this in a way that doesn't completely remove you from society, like we all want to move out to farms and basically shoot our own deer and live off the land. If you want a way to fight back, comment down below. Let me know exactly what it is that you'd like to hear about. I'd love to make another video and help break down some of the different options that we have as far as buying from non-corporate brands that are profit driven and buy from brands that actually care about us and what's actually happening, and hopefully aren't feeding us potentially influenza chickens. But just comment down below. Please like the video. Let me know what else I can break down. I'd love to do it. And if you're not following already, the purpose of my main channel, especially my TikTok account, is to build a community of followers that donate $1 a day to individual cash apps that are sent to me via DMs or messages to help spread small amounts of wealth into large quantities to help people live a better life and have an opportunity at living a good life because of shit like this. I mean, really is what it comes down to. So if you haven't followed me on TikTok or even here on YouTube to keep up with what's going on, then please give me a follow. Help me out, help me help other people, and let's go through this and burn everything down in the process. Or at least find ways to work around it. Thank y'all. Have a good one. Peace out.